The sensory cortex includes portions of the cerebral cortex, that wrinkly outer layer of the brain that processes and makes sense out of information gathered by our five senses: vision, audition, sound, olfaction, smell, gustation, taste, and somatosensation, touch. When our sensory organs, such as our eyes and our tongues, come into contact with sensory stimulation, such as light waves and food molecules, our sensory receptors translate that stimulation into neural signals. The primary sensory cortex is the first stop for those sensory neural signals. Each sense has its own area of primary sensory cortex. So, neural signals coming from our eyes carrying information about vision travel to the primary visual cortex. Neural signals coming from our ears travel to the primary auditory cortex. From the primary sensory cortex, sensory information is then sent to the secondary sensory cortex for further processing. And finally, sensory information from the secondary sensory cortex is passed on to the multimodal association cortex, where information from different sensory organs and other areas of the brain is combined into, well, that dog sitting in front of you. Let's go back to primary sensory cortex. Figure 1 shows where each sense's primary cortex is located. Please note the areas with dashed borders are normally hidden from view. The primary sensory cortex is where the brain first begins to process sensory information. For the primary visual cortex, this is where the brain begins to identify lines and edges, contours, and the movement of boundaries. The primary auditory cortex is where the brain identifies the most basic elements of sound, such as frequency or pitch. Because the primary sensory cortex is the first step in which the brain begins to process sensory information, the resulting output of these areas